Welcome to Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast exploring the current state of Toronto's condominium industry from a unique, constructive perspective. Through engaging and entertaining podcast interviews with the many stakeholders in this industry. This podcast is brought to you by Fusion Corp, a construction management company. Here's the founder and CEO of Fusion Corp Developments, Inc., and author of Building Toronto Skyline, the host of this podcast, Nick Ainis.
Hello. So, welcome.
Great to be here.
We've got a very important guest here today.
I believe this is the first time, Nick, your guest has a deeper voice than you do.
I was about to say, did somebody walk in behind me? I don't know what you're talking about.
No. We have a very, very serious guest, and we're honored to have you here, Richard. So this is Richard Lyall from RESCON, and great organization. Richard walked in his cowboy hat, and we wish he kept it on, but that's okay. And this is our first time we're meeting, Richard. And it's a pleasure. So thank you for coming today. I'd like to thank you for joining our podcast here today, and it's an honor to have you here. I just want to give you a quick background about myself in case you don't know too much about me, but I'm Toronto born and raised, okay, which is great. I studied architecture at Ryerson University. I worked immediately in the condo industry as a construction project manager for many prominent condo developers. I founded Fusion Corp in 2005, and we became Terran registered in about 5 years later. And now we're a vendor builder. We're a boutique construction management company and development company. And last but not least, I'm an entrepreneur, and I wrote a book about building Toronto Skyline. And here we are at the podcast because I love talking to people. And I love talking about our industry. And that's about enough about me. And want to hear a little bit about you. And you've had an extensive career in the building industry, and you have an impressive resume and a great educational background. And I thought you were a serious guy, but now that we're getting to know you a little bit better, you seem very down to earth, and you seem like a really nice guy. But I've also heard you speak, and you know about all the issues in the industry. We've got lots of things to talk about. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about your educational background, your career, how you got into the industry. We'd really love to hear a lot about that.
Well, absolutely. I was born in Toronto, but I grew up in the Caribbean. My mother was from Ireland. My dad's family were from the Caribbean. That's where they came to Canada from. And we did a bit of a U-turn there and went back down south. So a lot of what guides me has been that experience of, nice. And it was in a place called Belize.
Oh, Belize. And that's very popular now, huh?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's hot. It's a cool place. It's unique in many ways.
Do you go back there at all?
Yeah, I do.
Nice.
I do. I got family. I've got a brother there and a nephew, and others, and family in Europe. Typical.
Is it Spanish or Portuguese, or
it's all things. It's Garifuna, which is the original Caribbeans. Oh. It's three different Mayan Indians, Mexicans, Spanish. And then this thing called the Belize Creole, which is sort of a mix between Scottish loggers and originally some slaves, although after a battle with the Spanish, they beat off the Spanish. That period that ended before it ended in other places in the Caribbean, and they have their very unique culture. And a lot of things to see. Second largest barrier reef in the world. These magnificent Mayan sites. And then you have that Garifuna influence, which is the original Caribbean. So it's cool. So I grew up there, and then I came back here to go to university. And then I was either going to end up living here, or in Ireland, where my mother's family are. And I ended up staying here. And then I was a construction worker, drove a truck. I was a orderly porter in a hospital. I always remember the time when I'd go to lectures at U of T, but I'd have some, I'd sometimes at the odd time I'd have construction boots on.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it was. But I had a car, I had an apartment, I paid my tuition.
Good for you.
I had a part-time job. I was a varsity blue, championship rowing team.
Excellent.
It was a phenomenal experience. But you could do that then, and that's why today, when I see what's happening to young people today, that you just can't do that anymore, and that's wrong. That's not the world being a better place. We somehow lost the narrative on where we were going, and where we are right now, of course, it's horrendous when you think about on the salary of the mayor of Toronto, you can't buy a home in Toronto.
Yes.
What went wrong? And then when you start to break that down, it's not complicated. I mean, housing is complicated. Housing is probably the most regulated thing that we produce. Mm-hmm. And it's in a complex environment, but at the end of the day, it's really a supply and demand situation.
Yes.
And on that note, I'm going to segue. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers. Looking at the numbers in Texas right now, which blows my mind, because in Texas right now, rents are falling, home prices are coming down, they're moderating, and they've got 4 of the 5 fastest growing cities in North America. Yes. And you think, well, how did that happen? Well, the thing is that they had demand for housing, and they produced more than they arguably needed, and so prices adjusted. That's the way a market should work. Our market's dysfunctional. But anyways,
we're going to talk about that, because I know everything. I did some research. I listened to the Housing Summit, so
okay.
We've got tons of questions on that.
All right, great. But I was going to finish up by saying, so I went to U of T.
Yeah, U of T.
My dream in life was to represent, Canada, whatever, international relations, foreign, trade issues, economic development. And so I did that, worked as an economic development officer. I was in technology policy, trade policy, industry policy, and I also worked on trade relations. I worked on the original NAFTA deal.
Nice.
And then after a period of time, I left government, and I was either going to go high tech or construction. I felt very comfortable with construction.
Yes.
I've done all kinds of different, actual work itself.
You were doing that while you were in university?
Yeah,
and stuff like
and
that?
after, and
good.
All around it, and I made great money. I mean,
were you on the tools or?
Yeah, I was on the tools. So I've
houses, condo apartments, houses.
Yeah,
huh?
All residential, mainly low rise. Some restoration work, some demolition work. I was really good. I was very good at demolition.
Well, maybe you can demolish the housing industry right now, okay? And start all over again.
That's right. I wasn't very good at any of the finishing trades. That wasn't my forte. It was sort of the big, heavy, messy stuff.
Yep.
And I had all kinds of great experiences there. Mm-hmm. And I never forgot that. I always enjoyed that. I enjoyed the tactile nature of it, and I loved seeing what it was that you were producing.
Yeah, there's a product. You see a product at the end of the day.
In 3D. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you did that, and then you worked for the Ministry of Ontario, or you were part of that?
Yep. Industry and trade.
Yeah.
Industry, trade, and technology.
You were a senior policy analyst for the Ontario Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation, and Trade. That's what's on your. I looked at your LinkedIn profile. I was limited to that, but that's where you started off, sort of originally in your career, or?
Well, no, I actually did a couple of other things. I worked as a project manager with Pizza.
Oh, wow.
I worked in the food industry, distribution supervisor, because, times were tough when I first came out. There were no government jobs to get.
And I'm going to ask sort of a tough question, but when was that?
Oh, a long time. It was in the early 80s.
It was in the early 80s.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And did that, and I did those other things while I was doing that. And then I worked in industrial sales. I worked for the main competitor in the to 3M. American Technical Tape, electrical products division.
Okay.
In Canada, and then through that became an economic development officer. Some connections there in terms of.
How did you make that connection? It sounds like a pretty interesting story.
Well, the guy that was running the Economic Development Office in Central Ontario for the province of Ontario came out of the electrical industry, and then through a mutual friend, met him, and he liked the fact that I had that electrical experience in the electrical industry, and because I was a sales manager of the Electrical Products Division, and so, but he knew my academic background, which was, at U of T, specialist program, international relations, and all that other stuff.
Yep.
And the fact, that he liked it. It's kind of followed me through life. People like the fact that I've actually worked in construction on the tools.
Right.
And so he hired me as
you look like a construction guy too.
I feel like one still.
Maybe we can get you out to our job site one of these days. But,
well, I can do a lot of things with a shovel, let me tell you. And
probably better than a lot of the young people that are working in the industry. But
well, just as a segue on that, I went to a Jesuit college, and when you got into trouble, which I did frequently, you were sent to justice under God.
Oh, wow.
We called it jug, and they had a jug master, and you were put to work. And this was on a property they had in Belize that was below sea level, so you were constantly building dikes.
Oh, my God.
There were alligators, army ants, all this stuff. And if you didn't work hard enough in your punishment, you had to go back. And in that, funnily enough, I learned, because it was all digging, shoveling, road building, everything else like that, I actually learned how to do those things. I actually enjoyed it.
So you kept getting in trouble, so you could go back?
Well, I kind of became an unofficial assistant jug master.
But you know what? Isn't that a good thing? Like, did you learn something from that? Like suffering and going through some? Well, isn't that part of the spiritual growth process? Is like that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Yeah. Actually, I mean, they were phenomenal educators, but if you got into trouble, you paid a price,
right?
And we got into trouble knowing that. Or at least we did things knowing that if we got caught, we were going to get in trouble and pay the price. And that was just the way it was. But it built character, I think.
Builds character.
Yeah, builds character.
Important. That's important.
Because that's one of the things that is lacking in our school system today is there's no discipline.
Yeah, there isn't.
Yeah, no.
And there's not you're not building character today.
No.
We used to have some respect for our teachers, even though we fooled around. We knew where the line was at some point.
Yeah.
We crossed the line, but we had respect for authority.
And the funny thing enough, kids like to be held accountable for what they do. And if someone's not holding them accountable, at least making them pay the price for serious transgressions, then they just think nobody gives a damn about them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's funny.
So back to your so you got into the ministry there.
Yes.
And tell me a little bit about that. What was that what was that like? And then how did you get into the other organizations at some point?
Well, the funny thing was, the great thing about the ministry was I worked on from the Ontario perspective, and I spent a lot of time. We worked a lot with people in Ottawa, and we had consultants in Washington. We were bird dogging what the feds were doing on the free trade deal, but this was the free trade deal. So if you go back in history to the original repeal of the Corn Laws in the 1830s, which was the original free trade deal, it was good. It was good for enabling our world to grow and develop and to find out, okay, who's doing what best where, and let's deal on that basis. You do what you do best, we do what we do best, and we're not going to
we trade.
We're not going to punish. Yeah, and we trade as openly as possible, and so it was a great experience. It was about.
So so tell me just quickly Corn Laws, because you know what. I'm not familiar.
That was England. The repeal of the Corn Laws was.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that now.
Yeah,
yes.
It was the first in England, free trade deal, and that's part of what it made it. The sun never sets on the British Empire. The British were the original sort of free traders,
right?
Because they were prepared to do that. They weren't protectionist oriented, and of course Canada is a trading nation, and Ontario is a trading nation. And I always liked the idea of trade commissioner service. Promoting your country, trying to find, I was involved in some, like foreign investment coming to Canada,
right?
And of course that's tied to housing because when a company invests somewhere, if it's a good company, the kind of company you want to really attract, there are companies that care about their people.
Yeah.
And what's really important about people? Where you're living.
Exactly.
Right? So if we're going to build a plant in Ontario, okay, there's a whole pile of considerations that go into that. But two of the big ones are, what do we have to pay people? Well, do you have the people? What do we have to pay them? And what's their life like? Because you might be paying people really good money, but if they can't afford to live, or all of their money is going into just housing, nothing else, and food,
I see where this is going.
They're not happy.
Of course.
And that's the problem that we have here.
So then how did you transition from the ministry to, I guess your first position is what I have here, and I'm trying to read my notes here, but
so I
you went to the MTABA. Yes, MTABA.
The Apartment Builders Association. That was an association, a bit of an interesting group. That was the industry association that was made up. Their members were the companies that build the apartment buildings during the great apartment building boom.
That was in the 70s, yes. They called them MERBs, I think, right?
Yeah, they had MERB programs, limited dividends, stuff like that. And they were, so what happened there was I had some labor relations experience in my background. I had, all the other experiences being a construction worker. Again, that was a big deal.
Construction,
because
sure.
if you're going to negotiate construction collective agreements and you're at the table, let me tell you something. If you're some suit on the other side of the table, the union guys aren't going to, they're not going to respect you, really.
They're going to rip you.
Yeah, you've never been there, right?
No.
You have to know what it's like to have been, say, working in downtown Toronto when it's like minus 30 and you're trying to brace something and you're freezing and, construction can be tough. And,
it is tough.
And if you've been there, and you know what different sites are like, and you're dealing with people and dealing with situations where that understanding of what the work really is all about is impactful. And I think it does make a difference, and it allows you to make that connection with, in that case, the other side. The union
that's
side.
great.
The other thing was...
I think the key to negotiations, you have to understand the other side.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're...
Yeah, if you can say, look, hey, buddy, I've been there. Like, I know what you're talking about. Yes. And you can say, you're right, or you can say, that's not the way it works. You're full of it. That kind of thing, right?
Exactly.
But you develop that rapport, and that and honesty, of course, is a huge factor in that. But in the government, I worked through the NDP, came into government, and at that time, I didn't want to go to the feds. I didn't want to go federal. Because working in Ottawa just was not appealing for a bunch of reasons.
Fair enough.
And I was at that point in time where I was spending probably about 80% of my time was on, was just wasted time.
For sure.
Like, because you have to understand the system in government, how it works. And then there were some things that were happening that I didn't like. And I thought, okay, it's time to leave, right?
Right.
And I had that information technology background, and I had the construction background. And then someone I knew in the Premier's office that had worked in Peterson's office and then came into the government, left not long before I did. And then he phoned me up one day and he said, there's this group, they're looking for somebody to run their association. And I went, well, that's weird. Okay. I looked into it, and it was interesting. It was...
that's great.
Yeah, really interesting group, and then we sort of built it out from there. So now we've got, RESCON now, which is kind of an umbrella group, and then we've got a bunch of other
we've got a bunch of other organizations under RESCON.
Exactly.
Yes.
And really,
so you're part of both, actually, are you not? Or
yeah.
You're CEO of RESCON, and you're
nominally still not nominally. I'm the president of the MTABA.
Excellent.
Yeah,
that sounds amazing. So you made this amazing. You made that. You had your core. At your core, you had this educational background, where and you had that experience with negotiations.
Yep.
And construction being your core, it was a logical next step for you, and it seems like like it's worked out well for you, because you've been at the MTABA?
Yeah,
for 34 years.
Yep.
And RESCON now for 24 years, right?
Yes, that's right.
Excellent.
That's right. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's talk about RESCON for a bit. So RESCON stands for the Residential Construction Council of Ontario. Okay. It's Ontario's leading association of residential builders.
So we say.
I'm reading from the website.
I know. I love some of this stuff. You gotta, we
gotta. But that, I mean, it means something. It's worded well. So let me finish here. Committed to providing leadership and foreseeing innovation in the industry, and our members build the communities and homes of the future. And you have a mission statement: cooperating with government and related stakeholders to offer realistic solutions, which is important. Mm-hmm. To a variety of challenges that face the residential building industry. And what a time to be part of RESCON, because that's a big deal now.
Yep.
And so we are a recent member of RESCON. So somehow someone sucked me into the organization. And but we
wasn't
see
me.
Well, I think we're starting to do the accreditation. So
yeah.
I worked with Andrew in your organization, and he helped us through that. And there's many good reasons to be part of RESCON, and I'm here to learn more about it today too. So,
well, one thing I like about RESCON is we've got some deep subject matter expertise in the organization, like Andrew Pariser, who's our VP.
Yes.
On all things labor relations, he's probably the top guy in Ontario on that, or girl. I don't think he's a girl, though. That might come. You never know. But no, he's.
Is he listening? I hope he listens to this. I'm going to send this tape to him. So.
But because we like to work on facts and knowledge, so and because that's what really it's the truth that drives things.
Yes.
And, housing is it's a fundamental need in life. It's like food,
yes.
Stuff like that. Food, safety, and housing, right?
Yes,
those are your 2-3 core things. And so.
And the ability to earn a living. Obviously.
The ability to earn a living. But, where housing's concerned, you can make up a lot of stuff and whatever else like that, but eventually the facts are going to catch up with you, and that's what's happening right now. By the way, frankly, and in housing right now, the facts are catching up with us, which is a good thing.
Well, I saw the summit, and I was. It's not an optimistic picture.
No, right now it's bleak, but sometimes,
yes,
as you know, and I know you've got some scars on you. You got to hit a wall sometimes before change happens.
Did you do some opposition research on me? Well, I do have a few scars. It's a really tough industry for sure.
It's a tough industry.
Yeah, and running a company in this industry is terrible.
And the risks.
Lots of risk.
Lots of risk.
We take a lot of risk, and sometimes I've been a little bit too cowboyish about it. Yep. And every time you make a mistake or things don't go your way, because it happens a lot in this industry. Yeah, you learn a little bit more, and you try to be a little bit more wiser from your past experience.
Yeah, so. It's it's a little bit of people don't realize how competitive this industry is. It's probably the last bastion of true competitiveness, and the old sort of thing, like no guts, no glory, reigns supreme in our industry.
Yes, absolutely.
But when you make the wrong call, you pay for it.
You pay for it.
Yeah.
And it hurts. But you know what? You plow through. You carry on. You have to keep moving forward and try to pick up whatever you can from whatever bad experience you had. You're supposed to turn it positive. So that's the idea. You have to learn from it.
Yep. Live to fight another day. But we succeed sometimes too.
Yeah. We have good projects where they go well, and it's like baking a cake. You have to have all the right ingredients. So if you pick good trades, you have good supers on this job site, you have a nice, good staff, if you're organized as a company. But another key thing is having a client who knows what they're doing in the industry. We have a lot of new developers out there, and it's a real tough road, because if someone doesn't know what they're doing on their side, you have to step in and try to catch them sometimes. And I find that it's happening a lot, because we get a lot of our clients are new developers. But the last job we just did in Whitby, we finished up a 110 unit condo development, and it was very successful. Good client. We had a good client who knew what they were doing. They've made all those mistakes in the past.
Yes.
They learned from them, and they knew when to pull the trigger on something. When something wasn't going right, they were engaged and involved, and we all worked together as a team to make the project successful. So, but so
awesome. I'm always in awe when I see a beautiful project getting completed, but the history of it and all the, it's not easy, as you say.
No, it's not easy from day one.
The challenge of getting especially in our market, like I like to say to people, if you can build here, you can build anywhere.
Yeah.
And we've got some of our members that are very successful builders and developers down in the U.S., for example, which is a very tough market, right? And we have a lot of international experience here, which is one of the beautiful things about.
And Canadians are worldwide.
We're worldwide.
We're in Dubai. We're in the Middle East. We're in Asia. So a lot of our companies are growing. Whether it's a consultant or a construction company or whatever the case may be, we're everywhere.
Yep. It reminds me, when Gorbachev, the Russian leader, just before the wall came down and the Soviet Union fell, he was in Manitoba, and Ukrainian people, same kind of climate, growing wheat, right, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he had that famous that epiphany where he said, "Well, it's not the people, it's not the climate, it's not what they're doing, it's not this, it's the system that's the problem." And that's the problem we have with housing right now. Still, I'm not. It's not a blanket cheap shot at everybody. There's a lot of people in all aspects of our world that are trying to make it better, but the problem we have is systemic.
And we're going to get to that.
We're going to get to
that's that. That's the most fruitful part of the conversation today. We're going to get to that. But I want to just tell you, I'm going to list a couple of things that were interesting. Areas of focus are labor relations and collective bargaining, building code reform and technical standards, building science and innovation, labor supply training and education, market housing affordability and land supply issues, health and safety, and liaison with government. So you've covered all the areas of focus, all the issues, and
we're really about the building of buildings.
Yes,
we're not on the marketing end of things. We're not. We don't really get involved in the land development and that part of it. Although we've got more involved in that now because that became a barrier. But we did set up a separate organization, the Residential and Civil Construction Alliance, to deal with infrastructure issues about 20 years ago.
Excellent.
And stuff like that. So, but our core things are about the building of buildings.
So here's a question for you. So I mentioned that I recently joined RESCON. There are a lot of industry giants in the industry, and as a boutique builder, because that's what we are, we're a small company. And not small, but we're, let's say, medium. Okay, I gotta sound pretty good. So, as a boutique builder, how can we engage more with RESCON? How can some of the smaller players contribute more in the housing industry? Because you hear, it's easy to be big and have deep pockets. You have a lot more flexibility, and you have market control. So there's a lot of things as a big player I can do. But think about what we just said, how difficult the industry is. Think about all the small companies out there who are still doing the same thing as everybody else.
Yes.
But the industry, like you also said, was very competitive. That's a challenge for small companies. So how can more smaller, medium-sized companies contribute, work with RESCON? Tell us a little bit about that. So that's a good question.
That's a really interesting question. And I'll tell you what we did. When we first set up RESCON, we had a view to having small, medium, and large builders. In fact, our membership sort of fees were kind of partly reflecting that reality. And you're making me think. I've got a friend of mine who's a builder. And back in the day, when we did that 20 years ago, he was saying, I'm a small builder, but I, blah, 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 blah. Now he's a big builder.
Right.
But he became a big builder, but he got involved with the association. He got on the board because any member can run to, you can get elected as a director of the organization. Yep. We've got various committees that are very active, and so any members can participate in those committees. And we certainly encourage that because that's where, we get our sort of feedback, as it were, whether it's health and safety or technical standards or building code issues and the like. The bigger policy issues are really driven by our board of directors and our executive committee.
Yep.
But yeah, we're just so, we're always trying to achieve more than we're really capable of handling.
Yeah.
And I've kind of learned that, and you have to sort of accept that that's a difficult environment to work in. I'm a great believer in throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks, because there's so many things in our industry in so many areas. You don't know where the next sort of break is going to be that you can, we can fix this here and now. Yes. Let's get on it. Sometimes that's driven by some kind of external event that has caused that attention to be born there. But there's so many elements to our industry that need attention. That's why, like, for example, the housing crisis, when you got into that, on its surface, it's pretty simple. But when you start breaking it down, there's about 20 different things there that needed to be fixed.
I see.
Which makes it kind of, that makes it challenging, because we'd have these periodic events where I get a call from a journalist saying, hey, they just approved laneway parking. Is that going to solve the housing crisis? And I went, no, not really.
Not really, but it's welcome.
Yeah,
it's a welcome policy.
Absolutely.
Because it's one extra unit.
Yeah, it's like modular housing. Oh, modular housing's the solution. Is this the future?
It's not.
No, it's not. And when you look into it, what we need 160,000 units, and somebody's talking about, well, maybe we'll build a plant will get built about 3 years from now that can produce 1,600 units a year. Well, that's 1% of what you need, right?
Exactly.
So you have to put these things into perspective.
I think you have to look at it, the collective whole, and it all contributes to housing.
Yeah.
And even a small idea should never be shot down, and should all be considered.
Well, it's like the dwelling, the garden suites, right, where you can build a nanny flat in your backyard. The rules were they were changed to allow that to happen, but then it wasn't really happening. Well, why was that? Well, because you've taken that new thing that you can now do this, but then you're sticking it back into the same old system again for approvals. And all of a sudden you're into site plan approvals and months and costs and whatever. And finally people said, well, I'm not going to bother.
I'm doing that in one of my projects in Meaford. So it's my house for me and my wife, and we've added an accessory dwelling unit.
Beautiful.
But I've got to deal with the Conservation Authority. So I was stuck because this lady didn't answer my phone. I'm not going to say which one. I guess I already did. But I got stuck for like 6 months, and nobody was answering my call or anything like that. So I had to escalate things, I'm another manager, and eventually I got a reply to my issue at the time.
And you're a really capable individual. You're an entrepreneur. You know how to make things happen. Imagine if you're,
a regular person,
Joe or Dorothy neighbor who's not conversant with all these things. Like, forget it; it's not going to happen.
It's too challenging.
And we, one of the other problems we've got a lot of these monopoly service providers to the industry that are government. That that you have to use them. You have no choice about it, but. If the customer service, first of all, you're not even sometimes viewed as a customer. Quite often the industry's, I don't know how this happened, but we're viewed as the enemy. Mm-hmm. And if you're not getting the customer service, you don't have any recourse. You can't say, okay, well, I'm not going to buy from these. I'll go over here and get what I need over here. That's a problem. And the lack of accountability. So I've been into I was in a company once that's one of the sort of, what do you think of as the Star Chamber companies, really big outfit, right? And I was in there about something else, and then something happened. I said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, we've got this site, 200 units ready to go, and we need that formal sign-off, the formal letter. We've been told everything's okay, it's coming, whatever else like that. And they lost a year because they couldn't get the actual formal approval in writing, stamped, sealed, delivered.
Wow.
And there was nothing they could do about it. And these are people that you think, well, these are the people that, like, some people like to say, well, they're the ones that really have, they got these, they got people in their pockets. No.
And you flip it around, and in private industry, if you don't do something, your back is against the wall. You have so many things that can come back to you if you don't do your job properly.
That's right. And the meter's running.
Right.
People realize these unnecessary delays, these chicken and egg games, you got to get that done over here before you can do this over there, cost money. And at the end of the day, who pays for it? The consumer.
Yes.
Whether it's a renter or a buyer or even social housing.
Yes.
The social housing providers are subject, and this is where we've made connections there in recent years with social housing providers, because they're subject to the same penalties and delays and
just like regular private developers and everything like that.
Exactly,
yes. Yeah. So I actually saw the committees on the website again, so I'm always going to the website. But you do have a lot of committees. A couple of them caught my attention, an anti-racism roundtable.
Okay,
that was interesting, and I'll tell you why. Because honestly, I have not seen that problem prevalent too much in the industry. Like we all joke around on the job sites.
I got a great story for you on that. You know what happened?
But I've never seen serious issues like racism.
Let me say something to that point. So these nooses appeared on some sites, right? There was a couple of residential ones, as it turns out, and the rest were ICI. But when that first came out, and it didn't last long, it ended pretty quickly. When that came out, overnight, we put out a press release. RESCON put out a press release that said, if you're caught doing something like that on one of our job sites, one of our members' job sites, you will be terminated and you will not be welcome back into this industry again, period. Wow. End of story. And I had people saying to me, well, the lawyers, you can't do that. You can't say that, whatever else like that. And I said, screw that. Yeah, let's do it. I'd love to have that fight over, you have to give this individual their job back. And you know what the principal thing was there? Racism is bad enough.
Yeah.
Safety. If you hesitate because, one race to another, whatever, you hesitate for a second when something goes wrong on a job site, you hesitate because that guy's black, white, Chinese, or whatever he might be, that can be the difference between life and death. And I've seen that. I've seen that happen on job sites. Thankfully not that often, but we put that out there. And we said, look, this is the standard. This is a residential sector. This is our industry. This is not happening. I did a whole bunch of tailgate talks on job sites.
Yeah. And
to your point, like I'm at a job site, downtown Toronto, big high-rise site. We got, 150 people, right? And I'm looking at the United Nations.
Yeah.
This is why some of the racism stuff doesn't really capture the nuances of our multicultural, beautiful multicultural society, because that is our strength, one of many strengths that we have that we're not taking advantage of enough in our world. But that's the reality of it. So for a lot of them, a lot of people are going, well, I'm not really experiencing this. I don't see this. And, my view of the world is that we're all human. We're all equal. Treat everybody with respect. Yeah. Treat everyone equal.
But we got to make fun of Irish people too, right?
Oh, nonstop, nonstop. And
Mike, you're Irish, is that right?
Don't even get me. Yeah. Oh my.
We're fair game, Nick.
Oh, we are.
I can sing.
They're perpetually abused.
I can sing Molly Malone. So, are we going to sing Molly Malone together?
Yeah, absolutely. And then and then we can work on the Scotch and the Welsh.
Yeah, of course. And the Greeks. I'm Greek.
Well, there you go.
There's a lot of Greek out there too.
Okay, you just reminded me of one thing. I won't say it on here.
Okay. Well, you can
It's
say
an
anything
Italian
you want.
joke about the Greeks.
Oh yeah.
You know what that one is. I know.
I think
Yeah.
so.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that one. You can tell me later. You can say it online anyway, so it's okay. But so another one that I liked in terms of the committees was building innovation. That sounds like a cool committee to be on.
So we've been on that.
Can I get on that committee?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, that's in its nascent stages right now. We're trying to pick our targets carefully. But I can remember when. So I got a good story for you here. I got a call from a guy. He's an English guy. He came over here. He's working for Woodworks, which is a sort of a wood building innovation industry group. And I got this phone call out of the blue from this guy. And I go, who is this? Anyways, he's saying, yeah, we're looking for somebody from the building industry that will support sort of these new ways of building with wood. And I went, yeah, hey, number one. Over. I didn't even think about it. It was like for a second, I said, yeah, we're in. And then we got into that. And I remember I ended up in London, England. I was talking to probably the world's leading architect on mass timber, CLT, NLT, DLT, a guy named Andrew Waugh. And this was 15 years ago. And talking about, some of the really neat stuff they were doing in London and in England on building with wood. And he said, so how are you handling it in Toronto? So now we're the former colonial entity,
yes,
right? And we are the hewers of wood and drawers of water. Everybody takes our resources and makes things with them. We don't. And I said, well, we can't do this, what you're doing here in Canada, because our regulations prohibit it. They don't allow for, mass timber buildings, light timber frame apartment structures, and this kind of thing. And then I said to him, where are you getting your wood for these projects in London? He said they're getting their wood from Austria and the United States. And I thought, wow. Talk about an ironic twist in history, right? But it took years, and I worked with a great Brian Tuckey, who was the head of he was running the Greater Toronto Home Builders, former deputy minister in the government. Great guy. He's no longer with us. And we worked on getting 6-story apartment buildings approved, light timber frame.
Right.
And now, mass timber now, we're getting higher. But we're catching up on these things. And we grow. We're a lumber world, an industry, all this stuff.
But, I'll tell you, building with wood, conventional wood framing, panelization, whatever you want to call it, because we've done that.
Yeah.
We've done both. It's not a fun product to use in the industry. We're using things like total precast systems. We did that in Whitby. It was a good system, really good system, because it goes up so fast. If you have the cladding, and you can get your building closed in very quickly.
Absolutely.
So we're starting to use that on a few jobs. We're recommending that now. Maybe the mass timber might be different, but the wood framing is so tedious. The sound system, the fire ratings, that's been very challenging.
So,
a lot of people haven't been doing 6-story wood.
Yeah. Well, one thing is, not so much in Toronto, but on the periphery and in smaller communities, the 6-story light timber frame building, 4 to 5, 6-story, is actually, they do a lot of like some of the hotels out of, the travel hotels, and also smaller apartment buildings.
And we've done it. We've done affordable housing projects with it. We've done some indigenous housing with that, with that system. But it just takes a longer time, and it's more tedious. And the inspection process is very tedious. So
that's the thing. This is where if you get into panelized housing and modular housing, and you get into the CSA 277 standard, where the thing has been certified engineered coming out of the plant, it can save time. I look at different building materials as all having their place, and I think we're getting into hybrid buildings now, where each material to its best use.
Yes.
But you're right. In certain situations, it might not be, or in fact, is not the optimal structural element that you want to pick for that particular building.
No, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. Every, I guess there was a guy I used to work with. He used to work for Cadillac Fairview. He said, every horse has its course.
That's right. Yeah.
And I remember that saying, and it's true. If you're out in the boonies, you're going to pick a product that's easy to build out there. You're not going to get the big farm workers to, leave a great big job in GTA to go somewhere 3 hours away. No one wants to work 3 hours away.
Yeah, you get a 4 to 6 story slab on grade apartment building that's light timber frame panelized. Those can go up pretty quick. And in smaller communities, that can be your ideal. That can be an ideal solution. That kind of thing, right?
But maybe that's the whole point of the Building Innovation Committee, where you're exploring all of these different types of innovations that are coming into the industry. Because let's face it, I think in many ways we're still doing things in construction like we did 20, 30 years ago with some innovation.
Yes.
But
like for example, the way we do basements, and that has evolved. Now we've got stone slingers and we got pumps and whatever.
Yep.
There used to be a time when we were doing basement foundations the same way they were doing and working with concrete back when it was originally invented for the Colosseum in Rome, right?
Yes.
2,000 years, things really hadn't changed that much. I know it's that.
That's interesting.
But we were really, really good at it. And then you had these precast, like Superior Wall System, the one in the States and whatever. And why weren't we adopting that technology here? Well, it's just because even with the old way of doing things, we were just so good at it, and we had the volume there that something like the Superior system was more expensive.
Yes.
And so we
didn't do that. And you have workers who are trained in it, and they have
good.
that skill, and we don't.
And then the way we innovated there was with stone slingers and concrete pumps and smaller forms, because
lighter forms and
that kind of thing. So we have like Toronto, the great apartment building boom when 80% of our rental apartments were created, purpose-built, 60s and 70s. What was the innovation that came out of Toronto? Flying forms.
Yeah.
This is the land of the flying form.
That's
and
cool.
That accelerated that industry. And that industry was an industry, it was interesting. It wasn't the traditional, like the home building industry at the time was very Anglo-dominated, right? Mm-hmm. And so we had this huge post-war boom. We had the baby boom. We had huge immigration. And the apartment building industry was really sort of, at the time, was kind of Jewish-Italian.
Yeah.
Right? These innovators that couldn't break into the other areas, but then there was this huge boom in this area, and they moved into that, because they were entrepreneurs, and we had this great combination of people and skills that came together that was so incredibly successful.
Yeah.
And this is one of the reasons why I've said, hey, back in the day when we had half the population we have now, and we produced as much housing then, and they were bigger units.
Yeah. As
much housing as we, in our best year in the last decade now, we did it before. And we had labor shortages and stuff like, they were picking people off of boats and literally getting them off the train as they arrived and putting them to work. What was the big difference then? You could get a laborer, for example, 1966, Landseer, 64, 58, whatever. And they're working the next day, right, on a job site. And then what are they doing in 3-4 years?
They're owning.
Buying a house.
Or buying a house, there you go.
Can't do that today. What went wrong? How did we let this happen? And the bizarre thing about it, the thing that it kind of makes me feel a little angry. And I understand why. And it's not the fault of any particular individual. It's, again, a systemic problem. We've got thousands now today. We didn't have them then, but today we have thousands of planners. We've got thousands of housing policy analysts and policy this and whatever. And it's worse. And that's, makes me think about, well, all the great things we've really done here is because of people like you. The entrepreneur, the innovator, the one who says, no, we can do this. I can make this happen, that are driving things. It's in spite of the system that you're succeeding.
Yes, of course.
Not because of it. And that's wrong. So, for example,
that's the creative free enterprise that it's about.
That's right. And we've had the chatting class out there. The talk. I was at another event the other day on housing.
Yes.
A room full of 200 very well dressed people. A couple of developers in there, but sometimes they're the ones that are sort of politicking. But it was all about housing and the problems with housing and whatever else like that. But it wasn't really people that were actually the builders of housing that were there. And it was more chatter and, how do we...
Theory and this and that.
Yeah,
and
it's like the last thing we need is another committee. We know what the problem is. In fact, yesterday, I think the Premier, and I'll give him credit for this, yesterday, Premier Ford came out and he talked about, and he was using our numbers, that 30 to 40% of the cost of new housing is taxes, fees, and levies, and development charges is the biggest part of that, and it has to be addressed. And sales taxes, because we're taxing it too much. And he was out there saying this has to be fixed. In fact, I'm going to be posting it on LinkedIn today, and it's going out on our notice. But it's great to see that the federal conservatives announced that you can quibble over the numbers, but they're going to provide. They're talking about tax credit on the sales taxes for new housing. Yeah. Originally when that...
what is that, under $1 million or something?
Yeah, $1 million bucks. Well, it's Toronto area, $1 million, it's not going to get you too far, right?
Well, it's a condo that you don't have to pay HST on.
Condo is good.
And you know what? It's a good... Condo is always a good entry-level...
I'm just saying that, the price of housing here versus Moose Jaw is different, right? And so they're announcing something on a national level, but
it's good.
Fantastic.
That's good.
That finally, because we did the first study through our infrastructure group, we asked the question and got the work done, which was what are the taxes, fees, and levies on new housing? Nobody had looked at it before. Wow. And we did the study on it. This was April 2023. It was released, 31%.
Wow.
And 3 months after that, in BC, a separate group, not connected with us, did their own report out there, and it was 30%. So 31%, we really, and the company that did the quantitative analytics on pulling that together, the president of that company was actually upset. He said, this is so wrong. This is a need.
Yes.
Housing's not some kind of optional thing in life. And we know, based on, and we've looked at the research there, in Scandinavia, they've looked at and have studied the connections between housing, adequate housing, healthcare, education, all these other things. This is not something on its own.
Yes.
And then if you look at young people, the article in the Star, it was a great article in the Star. I was actually talking to one of the reporters from the Star the other day about it, because I said it was an article in the Star, again, spring 2023. And the article said, there's so many young people that are stars, are STEM graduates, science, technology. They're graduating from school. They're getting offered jobs with $100 to $120,000 a year,
and they can't afford housing.
Let me ask you, or basically, by the time they pay all their bills and everything else like that, there's nothing left. And
I was gonna get to that.
Yeah. Okay.
Because maybe I'm wrong, but it's a good question to ask. So you compare that guy who was in the 60s, who was working on a job site, and 3 years later he bought a house.
Yeah.
But expenses and lifestyle were different.
Oh, huge.
So is it that we didn't have those problems before? We didn't have the cable TV charges, the cell phone charges, the lifestyle things that we do, the entertainment that we did. They didn't do that back then.
What the lifestyle side is.
But they worked.
Yeah.
They saved. It could be.
But they spent
could
money.
Be a generation. Yeah, but maybe they didn't spend as much as you think. Because I think if you compare how people lived back then to the way they live now,
Yeah.
they don't have the money. They pay all these other expenses. They want to have their lifestyle too. They want to go to those expensive restaurants at the end of the day. And they just don't have the money because they're spending it in many other areas, which is not a fault of anyone.
No, the life was different then.
It was different.
But they still spent money on other things. They made donations at churches.
Well, they went to the track and
No, but you know, the thing was the big ticket items. The big ticket items were different.
But is there a point there? Is there possibly a point there?
Some people like to say, well, there was a radio show and it really got me mad because the host was saying, well, the young people today have to save and work hard like we did back in the day, and then they can have housing. No, you cannot get around the fact. And that's
kind of what I just said. So you're not getting mad at me, are you?
No. No. I'm just saying that there to a certain extent, you're right. We have more diversions today that cost money, but there's also efficiencies, like with these smartphones that we have. They're phenomenal tools. Fantastic tools. I love it. It helps me do my job, but they can also be a huge waste of time, right?
Yeah, of course.
And but the back in the day, you did housing. The rules were simpler. The approvals process was much simpler, faster. You didn't have all the barriers that we have now, and so on and so forth. So you got things done faster. The ratio of income to the cost of housing. So for decades, that ratio was 2.5 to 3.5 to 1, right? Cost of housing to income. Now we're at 9, 10 to 1, right? In the U.S. right now, it's 5, 6 to 1.
I see.
We have to compete with the U.S. Their housing, you can get a STEM graduate from Toronto. They get offered a job in Austin, Texas. Beautiful city, great place to live.
Yeah.
They go down there, they get 3 times the housing for the money, and they're paying half the income tax, and they're getting paid in U.S. dollars. One of the interesting things right now is we've got this movements like More Neighbors Toronto and Toronto New Liberals.
Yeah.
These millennial movements they're YIMBYs. Yes, let's build housing. A lot of the leading leaders in those groups are young Canadians that went down the States, worked for a while, and they've come back here. STEM people, very bright. They've come back here and they're going like,
"What are we doing here?
WTF?
Yeah.
Like, what's wrong with housing?" And I for years I saw people say, "Well, our housing is cheaper than New York and London." Like it's like, oh, get a grip. Mm-hmm. We're not New York or London. Or Moscow was one of them, because Moscow, that's a different story now. But these other big cities in the world, and we're not those. I'm going to be in Tokyo in a couple of weeks.
Oh, wow.
I've been there before, but we've got a contingent going over for the Japanese building show, and which is almost as big as the big one in the U.S. We're going to be looking at stuff there. But Tokyo, a city, Greater Tokyo, almost 37 million people. And that city works, and their housing is less expensive than ours. It's just as good as our housing. Their transit systems are better, yada, yada, yada.
Yada, yada.
What are they,
But it's smaller, though, isn't it?
No. In fact, there was a point in time where that was true. But now I saw some analysis that said that their housing is about 9% smaller than, it's a fractional difference.
Fair
but
enough.
The cost of housing there is much less than it is here. Yeah. And how is it that they do that? And we're going to be visiting some really interesting stuff and seeing some interesting technology there, because the Japanese are world leaders in off-site construction. So modular factory-built housing. And it's, like there's Toyota Homes, automotive into it. Sekisui is the biggest offsite producer in Japan. They I think it was earlier this year, they bought Richmond, America in the U.S. for $4.8 billion. Sekisui is now the 5th largest home builder in the
wow.
United States. Very quietly, they so
is all this on the innovation committee or what?
Yeah, we're talking about stuff like that, and we were in Stockholm, we were in Sweden, we've been in Copenhagen, Vienna.
Wow.
And innovation, like the city of Singapore. Singapore, get this. Singapore has 4 giant incinerators. They burn all their trash. They generate electricity for housing
from that.
And then the ash from that, and they've got these scrubbers. It's an incredible system. They have developed a new form of asphalt for road building. So they use the ash to build their roads.
So full circle.
Yeah. Vienna, the number 1 city in the world, livable city, right? They have incinerators. They're importing garbage from Italy to burn in their incinerators. Copenhagen just built this massive incinerator where there's actually a snowboard hill on it. You can go snowboarding on the incinerator. I'm not kidding.
Mike, you know about that?
So
meanwhile,
it's worth the flight to Copenhagen to do that.
It is.
Highly recommended.
Yeah. And what are we doing? We've got something like 700 trucks a day going to Michigan spewing diesel to dump our trash there. Because we can't do that here. Why can't we do that? Oh no, incineration's bad.
Yeah, fair enough.
You got all these things, and then remember we finally broke the exclusionary zoning thing in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
Finally, because people are going, well, how do we have? Well, 70% of the land in Toronto was relegated to single-family housing, and if you wanted to do anything else but that, forget it.
Yes, exactly.
Right. So we aspired to be a global metropolis. But we didn't want to we didn't want to lose we didn't want to lose the pull-ups.
Well,
right?
I see a lot of amazing things happening worldwide, and you see it all over.
Huge, and we need to look at these things because every single problem we have with housing here, technical or otherwise, this is not a moonshot. It's been figured out somewhere else already, and we know those stories. But we've got people with blinders on.
I think we have people that don't have the bold vision. They're not visionaries.
Yeah,
and you see visionaries all over the world, and they're making these amazing products all over there. They're skyscrapers, or they're
the design,
the line in Saudi Arabia. Very interesting project. I'm just bringing up a few examples.
I think that one's a bit nutty, but that
it may be nutty, but it's still. It's a very bold idea.
I know. It's a
very bold idea.
Unbelievably bold. Yes. Yeah, unbelievably bold.
But we don't have those here. We're still talking.
We're
still talking about high speed transit.
Tell me something. When was the last time you saw something from some government leader somewhere that said this is the vision of how people are going to be living in Canada or in Toronto 25 years from now? The next generation. Nobody. It's all short term.
Short-term thinking.
We get these fits and starts. You got 3 levels of government doing. The city of Toronto just had an announcement yesterday, and some people were initially jumped on it and said, "Oh, this is great." And somebody said we should put out a notice on this. I said, just wait. Let's have a look at this. What are they really talking about here? And I was quoted on CBC TV as saying it was basically, when you broke it all down, word salad. Because they were saying we want to add another 20,000 units, and we're going to cut development charge. I'll go, okay, that makes sense because TCs are just a regressive, inequitable tax on consumers, and they've grown way out of control, right? So they want to do that. They're going to do something on property taxes and this wonderful thing. And then you get down onto page 4, and then it says, "But Toronto's got some money problems, so we need $1 billion from the province, and we need this is contingent on $7.3 billion in financing from the federal government and whatever else like that."
And then there you go.
Good luck
Squashed.
with that. So it's more
of the same
baloney, right? It's I looked at it as Toronto's looking for a scapegoat because Toronto is not like their Housing Now program that started under John Tory that Chow picked up, added another 25,000 units to it. And this started how many years ago? Let me ask you a question. How many units have been occupied?
I think it's
Zero.
that's
Yeah,
right.
no, it's.
I think they were talking about having one under construction or something like that.
Yeah.
That's
Finally. And, we've got the great volunteer organization headed up by Mark Richardson, Housing Now TO.
Mm-hmm.
All volunteers. They're crunching numbers and doing work and scrutinizing things. And I'm thinking, where are the battalions of bureaucrats? The city of Toronto's got almost 500 and something planners.
Yeah.
More than half of them are just doing policy work. God knows what that means, right?
Yeah.
Less than half are actually reviewing things. It's still taking as long as it ever did to get things approved. And by the way, they upped their numbers to that level because that was the excuse a while back. Oh, we don't have enough people. Well, they hired all the more people. Things aren't getting done any
They're not
faster.
getting better.
So where is that going? And so, but coming back to the vision thing, that's we kind of lost the narrative on that stuff, and
It's the vision, and it's also the ambition.
Ambition, yeah.
You got to have let's call it cojones, if I can use that word.
Well,
because that's part of that. It's part of, you have to have first of the ideas,
yeah,
but also the guts to go ahead and say, listen, we're going to shoot high. We're not going to shoot low. Yeah. We're going to think big.
Well, exactly. And it's not, the reality is this is a whole other different conversation. We don't just have a housing crisis here. We have a growth management crisis.
Right.
Because we just didn't screw up housing. We screwed up immigration. We've screwed up healthcare. Whatever happened to e-health,
God.
that kind of stuff.
Healthcare is
education. Education. What is going on with
education?
that? Like we spend more money per capita on education than any country in the world, and the results are they're mediocre. Right? Mm-hmm. Like what is happening? So we're not pulling these things together properly. And we're taxed enough. There's no doubt about that. In fact, we hit a tipping point on taxation. And so, and especially, of course, taxation on new housing.
Yeah.
No other jurisdiction in North America taxes housing like we tax housing.
Fair enough.
And,
so let's lead into the amazing Housing Summit 4.0 just recently happened.
Yep.
I missed it, but it's all online.
Yeah, you can watch it online.
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, good.
Yeah,
I
saw parts of it. Awesome. I didn't see everything. It's like 4 hours.
Yeah.
So I caught a few people here and there.
We had a great panel of mayors. It was,
I saw that.
That was fantastic.
That was amazing.
Marlon Bray, of course, always
very articulate.
72 slides of this is the truth.
A lot of facts.
A lot of facts.
Like I think he indicated there was he was basing everything on math, and there was all these stats that look very alarming.
Numbers don't lie. But this is where, you had people intentionally obfuscating or trying to bury numbers, right? I remember with the first time we did a study of 172 tall buildings in Toronto from between 2006 to 16 because we felt that things were getting worse. To get the data out of the city, they weren't giving it to us, but what we did was we had a partnership with U of T Engineering, and we had some PhD students that got the numbers from the city.
Oh, wow.
We did the report and showed that things were getting worse and worse and worse.
Right.
Slower and slower and slower. The chief planning commissioner at the time was very upset with the report when it came out and said, well, this is all untrue. Right. These numbers aren't right. And then we said, well, they're actually your numbers. and then the excuse was, well, projects are bigger and more complex than they've ever been. Well, the clever engineering students, the really bright crew there, crunched the numbers and showed that there was no correlation between the size of the complexity of the project and how long it took to get built. So this is getting worse. Here are those numbers. That's the kind of research. And we also did the report on what percentage of GDP should be spent on infrastructure. You need those numbers. We did the report on taxes, fees, and levies and showed that this is out of control. And people were talking about it. I couldn't believe the lie of growth pays for growth. and this was the justification for these ever-increasing development charges. Well, no, the developers don't. The insidious thing there, the developer pays it up front, as you know, right?
Yes.
But there's a reckoning on closing, and that's where that's where the developers made good.
They're charging back to the homeowner in some respects.
Because it comes. That's how you price. You know.
They can't do the job. They can't do the job if they don't do that.
So, and that idea that growth and make the developers pay. I mean, I used to see that, and I think, why isn't somebody screaming it? Because we're construction.
Of course.
But I'm thinking, where's the people on our team that are screaming about this? That this is baloney.
Yeah, of course.
They
think that like this notion of the developer being the rich, powerful, bad guy in the industry, just making loads of money off people.
Yeah,
it's not true.
No. I mean, we do have.
They're successful. Of course.
We have very successful people.
You have people who had land 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, whatever the case may be.
They had the vision.
Yeah,
and they took the risk on that. Because I can tell you that there were people that bought land that got captured in the Greenbelt, and they lost big time because they've been carrying that land for years. Yeah, and then all of a sudden it was like, poof.
So, just a quick thing. How many people attend? I was curious to see, because I know there was an online event, and I wanted to know how many people actually attended live.
It depends on, like, you had people in and out, depending on presentations. I think we had registrations close to 1,000, but at any given point in time, we had like 500 and change, 600 around there.
Yeah, because I guess people are busy and stuff like that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But the nice thing about it was the attendees were all, people, industry people, and planners. So we had a lot of planners on there too. We have a lot of planners that support what we're talking about.
For sure.
Because they don't want to be
part of it. They're part of this process, and they complain about municipalities all the time.
Yeah. Well,
I think so I've worked in various municipalities, so I'm not just Toronto guy.
Yeah.
Even though we like doing work in Toronto too, and it's probably got worse and worse and worse. If I keep doing projects in Toronto, I'll have to learn or write another book or something like that. But I see a big difference from municipality to municipality. Some people get it. Some people don't get it. I'm doing some work in Owen Sound, project with my wife. We're doing a...
beautiful.
We bought an old 1800s historic courthouse and jail, and we're converting it to an event space, dining facilities. It's really cool, actually.
Yeah.
It's a very interesting project. But Owen Sound, they rolled out the red carpet. Yeah. They're open for business over there.
Yeah.
And I found that really
You're not
good.
the enemy.
No,
you want to make things happen.
They are very respectful. They solve problems. They come back to the table. Like, mind you, I've been in the planning process for still a while because I had to get an OPA rezoning application, etc. Right. I'm in site plan right now, almost out of it. But they look for solutions, and I think you still have to go through the public meetings, and there is some consultation I think is valuable.
Yes.
Because you always get those neighbors that are just very anti-development or anti-change, but those you got to have. I think you can't just ignore the community, because you have to talk about. But
there's research that shows, for example, on those the community consultations, there's research that shows that by and large, a lot of that stuff is a complete waste of time.
Yeah, it is, because most of the issues they bring up are BS.
Yeah, exactly, and or you get this nutty minority that's running and blocking things and whatever else like that because they're allowed to do it. This is where the rules need as of right rules, and we're getting there. There's more of that kind of thing happening. Right. So you want to have those community consultations when you're doing something that's really new and novel, right? Something that's really out of the ordinary. But we're getting to the point now, like we talked about, main streets, avenues, and corridors, as of right zoning, go up to whatever height. I was just on a meeting with Mississauga's looking at that. They're looking at some pretty serious expanding the sort of how high you can go on Main Street and certain corridors and things like that, because that shouldn't be. You shouldn't have an entrenched barrier in a regulation that's only used as a way of leveraging something out of a developer.
Yes.
Because you're not just okay. So you want to leverage something out of a builder developer, but who are you really leveraging something out of? You're leveraging out of the consumer,
The end buyer.
at the end buyer, and this is where that was lost. And part of the reason for that is, and it's kind of, and I found this out a few years ago, and my response to it initially was, "You're kidding, right?" And it was a great guy, Murtaza Haider,
Yes.
prof at TMU,
Yeah.
who said, "Well, to become a professional planner in Ontario, you don't have to study any economics or business.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's considered sort of not really." You don't want to, it's almost like you don't want to get your hands dirty in that stuff. So your job is to design the perfect community. Well, you can't design the perfect community unless you understand some of the economics and business factors of it.
Of course.
But this is where I think there was part of the overall problem, the growth management problem that we have right now, is these are technocratic challenges. They're complex things related to infrastructure. What kind of modeling are we doing? Are we doing digital twinning? Things like this, and perfecting and improving where we're allocating scarce resources to infrastructure and things like that. What,
Sure.
How are we managing these things? You need technocrats to manage that. And that's a whole other conversation. What's happened systemically and in the realm of public administration is a serious problem in this country, because I can tell you, when I first joined the OPS, I took a pay cut.
Yeah.
I took a pay cut to join the government, and I did it because it was an honor. Because the Ontario Public Service was considered one of the best in the world.
Wow.
And there's a disproportionate amount of, historically, there was a disproportionate amount, and we punched way above our weight, of Canadians in international organizations because we were good at that stuff. We're not now. Canada's a bit of a joke internationally. Nobody takes us seriously anymore. And then the Ontario Public Service, there's a lot of good things happening there, but there's some structural things that have happened there and functional things that have happened there that have weakened that. So we're not making optimal decisions on technical issues. Like, for example, we are incapable of building a functioning LRT on time and on budget in Ontario, if you think about it.
Yeah.
Think about it,
Yeah.
right? When's Eglinton going to open?
We don't know.
Who knows? It might never open. Ottawa, the Ottawa LRT, and the 25 years it took them
You
to...
like that thing? The LRT?
Well, the city of Shanghai built 400 subway stations in the same time it took Ottawa to completely screw up a single LRT line.
There you go.
So what is it that, and you look at the Japanese, you look at the design of housing and building designs and the innovation in Japan compared to us, it's like...
Goes back to the vision and ambition.
You get on a plane and go to Tokyo tomorrow and call me after 24 hours and tell me, does that feel like you're in a science fiction movie?
Yeah, my cousin just went to Japan, actually.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
Said it was incredible.
It's incredible.
It's like
Everything
new
works.
world.
It's like when we had to develop our own Presto card. Wow. Well, they've had Presto cards in other jurisdictions for like 2 decades. And then finally, there was the announcement last year. I laughed my butt off. No, I think it was earlier this year when the announcement was made that you can now use a credit card to buy a subway ticket. Wow. And they were applauding this. They were applauding this massive mediocrity.
Yes.
That was, and then I got on the subway the other day. I like to do it. And I was so angry. No Wi-Fi, no cellular service. Like,
unbelievable.
Am I in Burundi? Or, no offense to Burundi, it's probably not a bad place, but like, this is crazy that these things happen.
Yeah, we see it. So it was you opened the event. It was a great event. I heard a lot of concerns about the industry. It was a lot of doom and gloom too, actually. And for the most part, I guess mainly from Marlon Bray when I listened to him first, actually.
Yeah, you don't want to be near a high bridge when you're listening to Marlon Bray for dinner.
Of course. He seemed to be, he brought a lot of the statistics. It was quite interesting, and that we're in a crisis and it's going to get worse. And I think we talked a little bit about where you see the state of housing. There seems to be a big disconnect between government and the private sector in solving this problem. And I'm just going to ask this question. On the one hand, we've identified the problem exists, but without government solutions, we seem to be stuck. Why isn't there this urgency or ability to pull all the parties together and to take action? And who should take that lead? Because I don't think it's going to be government.
So, quickly on this thing here, and it's very important. Government, Canada and Ontario is so rich. Like when I think of the Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund of $1.7 trillion that had a profit of $260 billion last year, I think about where's ours?
Yes.
Because they're resource guys, right? Whatever else like that. We're so rich, we've been able to afford bad government. And I'm not pointing the figures at anybody on this.
Of course.
But we have had, I think, an ongoing situation where people can blow out these word salads, right, and talk a good game, but the results aren't there. For every dollar that's announced on infrastructure, 10 cents gets spent, this kind of thing. Because things would still work in spite of the fact that we weren't getting the systemic governance quality that we really needed.
Yes.
But I think that party's over now.
Right.
That party's over where you can have, people talk about, here's our Housing Now program, 60,000 units and whatever else like that. And everybody goes, oh, that's great. And then you have a little ribbon cutting at a 120-unit building, which is nice. It's good. That's 120 units. We need 120,000 tomorrow.
Yes.
Right? And you can have these things happening, and it's just not, now it's, the reality is catching up. And so we've had 45 different government agencies that are involved in the approvals process, 3 levels of government, 3 different, if you take Toronto, 3 different political parties that don't play well together, all sort of with their fits and starts announcements here and there, some better than others. I think the province has really done a remarkable, they've had 10 statutes so far in housing. But we're still not dealing with the elephant in the room. You can't get around the fact that a down payment today, and this is a critical point, I say this to people, a down payment today in Ontario is an increase in 2 taxes in the last 10 to 15 years, depending on where you are and how you measure it, right? But definitely within. So within half a generation, a down payment today is an increase in 2 taxes. What are they? Sales taxes?
Yes.
Feds make out like bandits on that. And development charges, which have grown between 1,000 and 2,000%. Like anybody getting a 1,000% increase in their salaries or anything like that?
No.
So get this though. So that's about 20% of the cost of a new house. Let's say, give or take, rough, back of the envelope, right?
Yes.
20% of the cost of the house. No, it's not just 20% of the cost of the house. That's 100% of a down payment.
Exactly.
And people, the economics of this is not fully realized yet. I think we're getting there quickly. I think the premier saying yesterday, and he's absolutely right, I'm so glad he did this, saying that, the 30 to 40% of the cost of new housing being taxes, fees, and levies is usurious. That's my word, not his. But it's like, for example, Calgary, they can't build enough housing right now. Like, they're going nuts trying to build housing. partly because there's been this big migration from Ontario to Calgary,
for
right?
sure.
And a development charge in Calgary for a home is $22,000. Why is a development charge for a new home in Vaughan $192,000?
That's insane.
Like, how do you explain that gap? And then you go to London, Ontario, it's $45,000. But again, it's all over the place, and no one is looking. And
so who is the party? What entity is going to pull this together?
This is what really, So we've got housing targets. There's a few of them, but they're all pretty much in keeping with each other. CMHC, 1.5 million, 3.5, depending on what time period you look at, right? Somehow, and I think necessity is going to drive this, and I think it's going to drive the three levels of government working together, and it's going to drive actually having a plan to deal with the housing crisis. And we've got targets, but there still is no overall plan, and no one's keeping. So we've got a new project we're looking at right now, where we want to come out with a regular sort of RESCON report on what are we actually producing relative to the demographic situation, because they're not keeping. So there's no plan. No one is saying putting things into perspective. Well, what? Okay, here's this announcement of some housing over here, or what does that really mean?
Yeah, it doesn't mean.
Right? We asked that same question. We did this on infrastructure, and we succeeded, which was really good, because we had a $1 billion announcement on infrastructure. Okay, that's nice. How much of that is actually going to materialize and be spent? And what does it mean relative to what our needs are? Is anyone modeling this stuff? I mean, we model things forever in the financial industry when we have these incredible projections and forecasts and whatever else like that. But nobody's modeling the housing situation, right? And if we need 1.5 million homes, but supply is actually falling, what does that mean 3 years from now? And some
That's
of the
scary.
Unforeseen consequences. We know there's we know the population of the city of Toronto is actually falling right now. Same thing with Mississauga. Numbers were coming down. Where's that going? And I was told the other day by somebody who's very much an authority on this that the only companies that are investing here are companies that must invest here. They have to be here.
They have to be there.
But other than that, yeah.
So this is. I think we can go on forever.
We could just get a case of beer. We'll keep going. No.
Listen. This has been an amazing.
Oh,
he's got it here.
I spoke too soon.
We're not drinking beer this early in the morning, but
it's noon somewhere, buddy.
You guys are Irish. That's why. So listen, this has been I would love to stay here longer. I think it's Mike that's got some pressing issues to attend to.
Nope.
But this has been an amazing discussion. I was fascinating information from today. Really appreciate your time. It's been an honor to be here with you.
Oh, thanks for the invitation. This is great. This is awesome.
Maybe we'll do it. Maybe we'll do it again and dive into some of these other issues.
We can get into some of these. We can break down some of these issues and look at them, the individual issues.
Yes, and we'll talk. Yeah, we'll do like absolutely. A deep dive on some of these things.
I'd enjoy that. That'd be great.
That was wonderful, and I commend you on hosting these events and learning so much. And I've discovered a lot today about you as an individual, about how you're really trying to learn from worldwide on how to solve some of the issues here in Canada and Ontario particularly. And just thanks again. And my last comment, I guess, is that I'm exclusively multi-res, so that's what I specialize in. As a smaller boutique firm, what is the outlook, and what are some things I can pass on to my team? Is the outlook dim right now? Are we going to start see an uptick in 2025? Interest rates are coming down. We're not starting projects. We're not launching projects. We're not getting the sales. I saw some of the stats yesterday from Marlon Bray. And just to close it off, what is the general outlook? And I think it's like, are people ready to jump back into the condo market?
So we
I would say no.
We just about every variable right now is up in the air. So it's a very unusual set of circumstances. Just every data point is shifting. And we had a tipping point, in my view, last year,
Yes.
where we finally hit the wall, but it was last year. That's when our sales started to crash, right? It wasn't immediately apparent to many people because there's that lag. You know, like, for example, we're going to be busy building out projects in 2025 that were sold in 2021, 2022, even back to 2020, right?
Yes.
And 2023. But the low-rise side of things is getting hit. So I can say that and interest rates, 50 basis point drop, yes, that has bolstered the market a little bit, in the resale market. And there's a big gap here between resale and new.
Yes.
That's a whole other conversation. So I think that, and so we're going into a big pothole.
Yes.
Whether you like it or not, because this isn't an industry that turns on a dime. Mm-hmm. There's long cycles, long swings here. If the government finally deals with the elephants in the room effectively, like the gross and unconscionable increase in development charges, and I don't care why or whatever, let's look at the tax on the consumer, and that needs to be addressed. And then there's some systemic issues like red tape issues that still have yet to be addressed. And there's a lot of people working on this. I know people in government that care deeply about this stuff. They're aligned with us. They get it. We get their problems and stuff like this. But it's time. We don't have the time. This is one of these things where, we're going to start a consultation process. It's going to go on for the next 12 months.
No, got to act now.
We got to act now. And if we act now, and we're going to have 2 elections, I think, within 6 months. We're going to have a federal election and we're going to have a provincial election. And the number one issue in both of those is housing. And the commitments and the action that is needed there is urgent. We've talked, it's a housing crisis. Yeah, I had to look up the definition of the word crisis at one point in time. Mm-hmm. A crisis is something that requires urgent action. Well, we weren't getting that.
Yes.
We were, so if that happens, if we get these things dealt with, and this is the plan, right? Because, one of the problems right now, like the announcement by the Fed, the conservatives, who we expect is going to be the next government, they have announced this $1 million thing. Well, guess what's going to happen? Anybody who actually pays attention to the news, who's thinking about buying a new house, is going to go, well, I don't need the new house right now, so I'll wait 6 months for the election, and then this will get passed, and I'll get that 40 or 50 grand cash.
Yep.
So it's going to things like that have an effect on the market. I'm not being critical of the conservatives on this, but I'm so happy they did that. I'm so happy what the premier has said yesterday about development charges. But we just need the action on that. If that happens, and we have the other changes, that could open up a whole new world for housing production, housing supply, and be a real boom. And then we're going to get back to dealing with some other issues like labor supply and stuff like that.
Sure.
Those are the kind of problems you want to have, right?
Exactly.
So I think that's possible. Absent that, we're in for a world of grief. Yeah, it's a world of grief. Yeah.
Well, you opened my eyes today, and I think we're on the same page. I love this. It was a fantastic podcast today.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
Very nice to meet you.
Great to meet you too as well. I know we're going to be.
We're going to be talking to each other. Excellent. So thanks very much, Richard. We're going to end the show, and Mike, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Thank you for listening to Building Toronto's Skyline, a podcast exploring the current state of Toronto's condominium industry, proudly brought to you by Fusion Corp Developments, Inc. Please share, like, and subscribe. See you all again in 2 weeks.